Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 154 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. All right, I got a report in on my gloves. Not the hero that I hoped they'd be, but this stone's way bigger. Done a lot more carving on it, and so I'm through the knuckles on these gloves. They're still way more rugged than anything you're going to buy, so they're great to do, and you can tape them up if you want. But as you carve, your hands will get, you'll get fighter's knuckles. They'll be all calloused up. They'll be great. All right, watching these videos, things are going to change between here and here because we're adding length. We added this, so this is going to start to drop. But my bigger concern was that this is somewhat pendant. Okay, these two folds, they droop down a little bit. Okay, this here rises up. Okay, this isn't the same angle as those over there. Okay, they got a little more pull, and so I want to show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to move them. I've still got some room with my depth, and that'll probably help me with the way the leg is. What I'm going to do, this goes back to how I talked about producing a line like this. It's not smart, and I'm going to use a big chisel just to discuss this, okay? It's not smart to cut these lines in like this, to go straight in and go and cut it and check a line. Now I'm limited here to a certain extent. I can push that up a little bit, straighten that up. But it's better to produce these lines by lowering what's lowering here and eroding that and leaving it there, because what that does is if you have a hard line cut there and then you decide that I'm going to move this a little bit, you may have to eliminate, you may have a check that creates a weak spot where it fractures easily. Because this hasn't been done like that, and these are tipped, okay? This isn't straight. This isn't a 90 degree going straight in. These are beveled, maybe 60 degrees. They're not 45, they're steeper than that, but they're not 90 either. And so what I can do is I can continue that bevel down and cut this top off, and that will move that edge significantly. And so I'm going to work on that here and try to get this to flow more like that one, because right now I'm not pleased with the way these look in terms of this. I want them to come down to be a little bit more. So I'm going to try to drop this one as well, and without losing, because we cut to that point there, so I've got that much depth. We cut into this depth, so I'm limited. But I can take this edge off, thin her leg up a little bit, and move that forward, and get more of that contour that I want, versus this where it drops here, then it goes up over her leg. Okay, so I'm going to work on this and be back in a few minutes. Let me show you this. Okay, what I wanted to try to show you, this is the edge of that original fold where it went and kind of humped up, and this is exactly humped up overlay. Now I've got it to where I can take this little bit of pendant right here off, and this flows and this drops instead of humps. Okay, this flows instead of humps. What I did is I went about 3/16 of an inch deeper on the bevel. I beveled it. Continue that bevel down. This is the original line you can see here. There's barely this faint line, but I was able to pick it up down in here. And so now I've got to take my round chisel. See if I got it here. I'll take my round chisel and I'll evacuate off the top to lower this. And I can probably tip this one a little bit as well to come down and pick up to match with it so that they stay parallel. I'll do the same thing here. I'll tip this just a little bit, and I can come in right here because I can't. This is committed, but I can probably come in because it takes some material off and do the same thing here. This will bring these two lines down. Now let me hang the camera up and explain a little bit. Now hopefully you can see that this no longer humps up over her thigh like it did before. It's much more analogous to this where it droops down, especially if we come up here and trim this little bit. Take that off right there. It's going to change the way that looks a lot. Just cut that right off. Okay, that's not perfect, but that line looks a lot different now and a lot more like this line on the bottom here than it did before. The reason I want to show you this in particular is that as you're learning, you're going to screw up, okay? You're going to make mistakes. Now, I didn't cut this wrong on purpose, okay? But as I carved it, it wasn't going where it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to look, okay? It didn't look like that. I want to go by the model because that's what I'm trying to do. I wanted this nice flow. And now this line looks a lot more like that line, and I can tune this one a little bit and pick up a little bit here, and it should go really well. I'll get those to mirror really well, and they'll look great. You're going to have, as you learn to carve, as you do this, you're going to be just carving along and doing great, and you're going to be carving and carving and carving, and you're going to go, and you're going to carve and carve, and you're going to do something like that, and that whole thing's going to go bloop and fall right off. Okay? You're going to have folds that do that, because what happens when you don't cut them the right way. And you will check lines, you will have things fall off, you will have problems. And you've got to be able to understand what's wrong and how to fix it. This looks long compared to here, but it really isn't, because it's got to be 50% more, so that's pretty close. So that's pretty close, but I still got to sink this a little bit, and I still got to sink this. These will come together. If I have to move a piece of drapery a little bit, I've got to understand how to do that. And by not committing, because I'm not cutting this drapery like this and sinking a hard line in there, I'm tipping it, and I'm working to that final, I'm working towards the center, I'm working towards that final shape. I have the opportunity to make some minor changes if I want to, or if I need to. And that's the bigger problem, is that you will stun this stone. You will do things simply either you haven't learned yet, or you got into the carving away and you accidentally put something in there that created a stress riser. You weren't thinking, or you were thinking but you had a brain fart and it happens. You have to be able to go in and fix it. And what normally happens, like during my apprenticeship, is if I blew something that was significant, and I generally didn't, but if I had something that broke and it was pretty small, my sculptor Gary would say, no, just leave it, I'll fix it. And he'd come in at the end and he'd shift it a little bit, carve it all over. You know, the big thing with faces is that, I got one of y'all that's doing this is doing some work. I'm going to use you as an example. He sent me pictures of a face that he carved, and I made some suggestions as to how I would fix it, because normally when I carved a bad face, I'd watch my sculptor fix it, and then I had to go in, then he would take and, a lot of times the upper eyelid would become the bottom eyelid, the eyes would go up, the mouth he'd cut the mouth off because I had a dog face and she was, her upper mandible was stuck out too far, and the eyes were too close together, and all this was too compact, and there wasn't enough room. And there's certain things like where you cut the nose, like if you cut a hard line above the nostril, no, don't do that. Leave that till the very end when you're done with everything. If you cut that nose and you go, you can't push that nose up, because those will fall off. You have to go all the way past those, and that's when you really get into dangerous territory. If you leave those nostrils till the end, then you can put them where you want, but the rest of it, you can, all of a sudden the bottom lip becomes the top lip, because the mouth should be way down here, and you've got to clear it here. The eyes get moved up. You've got to know how to amend those things, because when you're starting, you'll make mistakes. And even when you're carving, I talk about stone that I don't like to carve. We'll get some ornamental stone, a mahogany or something like that, that's not the best stone to be carving. And you'll be doing everything perfect, and there'll be a great big flake right there on the tips of her fingers or her nose or her lips. It falls right off. And you got to fix it. You got to be able to take care of it. So understanding how to do things like this is really critical. Now and because we're still working on our depths here, I had enough room so I can contour this and get an even better bevel out to her knee. That will bring this up. It will help everything look good. And overall it should look, because this is starting to narrow up a lot. This has got to go in here, so that it's inside of her thigh. This has to sink, and because this right here has got to go up, it's got to turn and go up just a little bit more. But this is almost, because this is the end of it, so it's got to go about there. But I don't want to cut this off until I figure out exactly, till we point her head, because I want her head and her hand on there right, and I want enough material in here that I can move her arm the way it needs to be and posture it So it looks like she's in repose, and she's comfortable, and she's natural, and she's got actual bones for anatomy, unlike a lot of this import work where they're hugging a heart and they got rubber for bones. No, we're going to make good bones, okay? So, but you have to learn to be able to make adjustments like this and make them look good. And I think that's already a really big improvement over the way it looked before, because I was able to take that off and I was able to bring this down, okay? Back to work. All right, let's talk about this stone. See if I can swing it. See how much better they agree? Much more this looks like that now. It still isn't perfect. We've got some shadow here that accentuates that drop, but until I get this foundation point here where the drapery, where that fold actually pulls from, I got to be careful about this, because I don't want to go too high and then want to be low up here by comparison, and it makes that curve walking. So I'm probably going to lose some material right there. As you're working, and see, I've done some work to get her leg more like the model. I had a point right here that's on the edge of the drapery and everything else. These points are supposed to be on the very edge, so this is still going to go in, you know, about 1/4 inch. And now I'm getting to the point where it's going to start to wrap and go around behind her. I have to be careful, because if this is what I was talking about with doing like the milling machine, you know, and you put it on the computer, the CNC and everything, and they cut everything all out. That machine's going to scan like this, where it's concave behind it. The way you do these folds has a lot to do with how they're going to look, if they're going to look real or if they're just going to look like stone. We want them to flow really well. We want them to look like they're fabric, okay? And so in order to do that, there's certain surface treatments that you'll do. And where this is undercut, if you do this the wrong way, once I start, remember the grain, you know, it's not like a statue. This is like a regular die. Grain's going straight through. That means this will split and come off real easy, okay? So if I do a lot of work here, because on the model, it's concave. It comes under because this fold kind of rolls out and it scoops it underneath. Once I start cutting underneath, I can't sink this as well, because I'm stuck. I don't have the material to go back into it. So I'm going to get this close, and then I'm not going to go crazy trying to get it perfect to finish it, because if I undercut this, then I can only put so much energy into this top edge. This end has to be finished first, and then I can do the undercut and finish that. And so if you, say for instance, you sent this off to, you know, somebody with a big CNC, and they did their thing, cut it all up, and the easiest way to explain the way the CNC leaves the surface is that it will have a series of lines. There'll just be a parallel line, a line, a line, a line. Everywhere where the tool goes and passes, and then it goes over and it passes, there is generally a step or a line at each pass. There's some amount of faceting or tooling or whatever. I call it combing, because it looks like combing. It looks like a topographical map. When you get one of those maps that's got that's built up in flat layers, so you can see a mountain. It's like a whole stack of little pieces of cardboard or something. You're going to have all those lines that you have to clean off. And when you have detail that's undercut, you're put in an awkward position because you've got to go back in and tool it where it's already like crazy fragile. And you never cut it like that if you're cutting it the old-fashioned way, you know, with a hammer and chisel or a hand machine or chisel. You would go ahead and you would address fragile areas first, and then you would address the relief behind them so that you never had to go back here and touch it again. You're done with it. You know, I've got to work for these to come in. This has got to sink to the side, and we've got another fold behind here that comes up. You see a little bit. This has still got to go in, probably 3 inches, 2 inches at least. This is the edge, and that's we figured it's about a 2-inch drop. I've got to go, you know, around 3 inches still into the stone. There's a lot of digging on this stone, buddy. This is a lot of work. And so I want to make sure that I've got her pretty well placed once I start digging. That's part of why this looks narrow, is that we still have to take off an inch here about, and then it's got to sink in another couple of inches at least. And that's going to gain me, you know, remember we talked about 2D versus 3D? You know, you see something apart, but if those details are actually like here, you've got this hypotenuse, and that's how I'm going to gain, like probably, I bet I'll gain half a feather, if not more, of width right here. And the same thing will happen once I shrink her arm and get rid of all this extra mass. It's going to make this wing look a lot bigger. You've got to understand what the end result is going to be, and you're not going to understand that in the beginning. You're going to get frustrated and say, man, this isn't right. She needs to be over here because this wing's supposed to be this wide. Then you'll do all this undercut and everything, and you'll be like, wow, man, that wing is way too wide and she's way too far over. Okay? I'm not crazy about pointing down flat like I did. It's really hard to do it, and it's really hard to get good points. But you know, we've got good references for a number of these points, and it's coming along well. Got to do a little bit more reducing her calf. I'm gonna, while I'm sitting up right now, instead of going up and down and up and down, I'm gonna go ahead and work this area to try to get what I can see for her thigh done pretty well. We've got to go a little further down in here, but I'm trying to make sure that this depth is just a little bit deeper than this one, and just a little bit deeper than this one, so we've got that good flow. That's what I was talking about with putting these on here, to give the viewer a way to understand what's going on, because your binocular vision, your 2 eyes, are going to be able to see that this is deeper than this, and that's going to convey that leg very well. When you do drapery like this, you can do it very flat. Just make it flat, and that's it. A lot of people do. To do nice drapery, especially like on the model, I don't really, the camera's not going to show it, but this is a really nice concave curved sweep, okay? And so I've got to have that same concave scoop in here and in here. I can work down, I'll show you my tool attitude here so you understand what I'm doing with the chisel. Using a round chisel, I can go down near it, okay? I'm going to do this and check the line. I'm going to carve and pare down to it, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pare to that relieved area so that the corner of my chisel is creating that edge. I don't want to stripe it. I don't want to check a line because that'll weaken this. This whole fold will fall off. Man, that sucks. What happens is that you will do a line like this. You may be up here where you think it's really secure, and you'll be carving along, and you'll go back and forth like this, and you'll put that energy directly into that line. And what will happen, remember I told you the stone will vibrate, the stone will puff. What will happen is you'll invariably find a spot across this fold that's just a little bit weaker than the rest of the stone, and it'll set a little check. It'll just be a little crumble. And once that crumble comes, you're going to have a piece that snaps off either up or down, and it could be an inch or two long depending on how long you checked it. But once you put that stress riser in there, that area to initiate the break, and that pushes enough energy to where it'll have a line right through there, and that whole big line, I got a little box of them somewhere when I was carving at Gary's, and I saved all my pieces, and I'd take it, I'd put them in a little container, and I was like, yeah, there goes her nose, there goes her fold, whatever. And you know, it's funny now, it wasn't funny then. But you want to avoid that. So don't put your chisel energy straight into that line. You can pare down to approximately where that line is, working into the mass, into the center, okay? I don't want to put a bunch of energy going like this and then cut it off, because that energy may take this off. I want to do this to relieve it, and then I want to work off carefully like this in order to break to that line so it goes down to it. And hopefully, unless I want a line right there, I don't, like down here, this needs to be curved. This needs to be pretty much of a scoop as well. So I want to keep it to where I can cove my chisel, rotate it at an angle so I can get the curve that I want, because I can take this chisel and turn it like this, and it creates that effective curve so I can get in there and do it. But as having the fold, I started to mention, the fold should have a proud hump at the front, and then a little bit of concave to the back, and that will denote the mass of the fold and that the fabric is folded over on itself. And then it has some resistance, and it will look better, it will create a shadow line. But once we put this out in the cemetery, all those little things like that you can't really see in the bright hot light, they're going to hold dirt, because dust blows around, gets on the stone, birds poop on the stone, whatever. All that stuff gets on the stone and rain washes it down, and all these little ledges or shells that have any bit of a horizontal attitude instead of being perfectly straight up and down are going to hold dirt. And it's going to make this look really great, because the stone's going to look really hot for the first 2 or 3 years until it starts to get dirty. And then you're really going to be able to see these details, okay? So, and that's something you learn with, you either work beside a master or you learn with time. And you learn by studying stones in the cemetery and seeing what shows and what doesn't show, okay? So, okay, before I go, it's another thing to remember. When you look at your stone after you take a break, like it's lunchtime now, I'm going to go up for lunch. It's important that you take an overview, survey, whatever, look at it, compare it to the model, whatever. And if you see something that's an issue, a problem, something you need to address, take your dirty finger, take your red pencil and mark it. Like this has got to go over just a little bit to make it look more like the model. Okay, so I'm going to mark that so I can go up and have my whatever break. And when I come back, I remember I've got to address that, because you'll get busy, especially if you're going overnight or over the weekend, and you'll have a little thing like that. You'll see it so obvious, and then you'll come down and your mind will be on something else, and you'll be working and you'll be like, oh, I was supposed to fix that. Forgot all about it. And the danger is that you address something else instead of that, because that visual noise jumps out at you, or you finish this, then you realize you needed to change it. So if you see something needs to be changed, mark it, and then you'll know to do it when you get back, all right? I'm gonna wrap it up and just say, my name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with a Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.